Mr. Ballard, you've gotten some questions about inhumane treatment of children who are being trafficked across international boundaries. Inhumane treatment, regrettably, as has been alleged against our own government. Tell me about the type of inhumane conditions you've observed from those who have been involved in child sex trafficking. Are they subjected to inhumane treatment?
Absolutely. The worst scenarios you could dream up. That's what they've been involved in. Not only during the New York Times, in fact, Senator Harris pointed out, the New York Times just this week talked about 100 different cases of women, children who were being brought in by the cartels at first to smuggle them. But then remember, that cartel is in charge, and they can switch and say, now it's a trafficking. I'm going to traffic you. I can make more money if I just keep you. And they start raping these children and these women, tying them up, binding their hands, duct tape. The New York Times reported this week.
They're paying with their bodies.
They're paying with their bodies, and exactly. And then beyond that, they end up in our big cities. There's been very successful prosecutions just this year in sentencing in Atlanta and New York. These Mexican human trafficking cartels who are taking children like Liliana and selling them in Atlanta, New York City, Phoenix, Los Angeles, selling them where they're being raped 20, 30,000 times, over a 5-year, 6-year span.
So these children are separated from their parents?
Yes, they are.
These children are subjected to confined, uncomfortable, and horrific living conditions.
Absolutely.
These children are subjected to cold temperatures.
Yes.
These children are subjected to every conceivable horror known to humankind.
Absolutely, they are.
And U.S. policy is facilitating and even encouraging it, is it not?
Unfortunately, I think it is.
We heard from Mr. McAleenan earlier today that in the last 10 months alone, there have been 1,700 known instances of an adult traveling north from our southern border into the United States, claiming falsely to be a parent or family member of the child.
Yes.
Would you estimate that to be on the low end of the actual numbers that are occurring?
Oh, no, I think that's the low end for sure. In the last 2 years, it's increased 360%, the adults who come in with kids who aren't their kids. And there's been some assumptions, I think, that need to be dispelled. I've heard today about that parents are sending their kids. That's not necessarily the case. I have information about kids being kidnapped and used as pawns to be their get-out-of-jail-free card, as Senator Cruz pointed out, to get in and say, look, I can claim asylum now. So these kids are being utilized. Frankly, and this is sad, the best case is that they're just being utilized so someone can get in and stay in. But I fear that once they're there, once they're already vulnerable, now there's a very profitable market in child sex in this country. Now, where else are they going to be taken? So I'm very concerned about. There's more than 10,000 unaccompanied minors currently in custody, currently in the care or custody of the United States government. I'm very worried about those. I'm worried also, Senator, about certain protections. In an effort to give protections to those who would claim, I'm a sponsor of this kid, I'm the kid's parent. And we want to protect those to facilitate the process of reuniting families. But please, let's put measures in place to have identity hearings or whatever is required to make sure that those kids are going back to parents and not back to their traffickers. I work operations in 20 countries, and I can tell you that when we save these kids and we take them to rehabilitation centers, we have them under lock and key. We have guards, armed guards to protect them because their traffickers come looking for their property. Oh, I can give you countless cases of this. So let's not let that happen in this country.
Slavery exists today, according to what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
Does it exist to the same degree as it existed in prior centuries?
Actually, the numbers, and again, not to downplay at all that horrible blight, the transatlantic slave trade at all, there's nothing worse than that. But in terms of numbers, there are more people in slavery today than ever before in the history of the world. In fact, you could add up all the people that were enslaved during the transatlantic slave period, the 300, 400-year period of the transatlantic slave trade, and there's more people alive in slavery today than all of those combined. And these are people who don't control their body, whether it's sex, labor, or organ harvesting, which we work all of those cases.
You've been involved in liberating those who are held captive as sex slaves.
Yes.
Have you worked with the Mexican government in doing this?
I have, very
What
closely.
Can you tell us about your efforts with the Mexican government?
I work very closely with the Mexican government. We've done several operations. We're currently running operations, and our goal is to find these kids en route to the United States, to be there to kind of cut it off, a preventative strike, if you will. We've rescued over 50 children so far. But the problem, as I'm doing these operations, and I've served as the undercover operator in many of them, as we're doing these deals, it's like It's like playing defense 3 on 1,000. You know, you see this coming. It's like catching flies with chopsticks. You get some of them, but I'm in my mind, just so you know what I'm thinking as I'm doing these operations forward deployed south of the border. I'm thinking, I wish to God I knew that there was, you know, smart barriers, a full protective, game along the southern border, so that when I miss them, and we will miss them, they have one more chance. One more chance, one more window of opportunity that we might rescue them through that port of entry. And right now, that one more chance is not viable.
Would a border barrier help us save some children from the unmistakable, unspeakable horrors?
Absolutely it would, because it drives the traffic to the law enforcement officers, the brave men and women who are looking for those children.
Describe how that works. How does it drive them toward the law enforcement officers?
Because we've limited their options. Right now, the cartels are clearly choosing to take children around the ports of entry. We just heard the stats. Over 90% of the children are coming around. The cartels are choosing that route because it's better for them. Why are we giving them that chance? Don't give them that chance. Make them go to the port of entry and wall it off with technology, with barriers, whatever's required to force them to have their only choice can be the port of entry. That's the highest chance that we're going to rescue children. And rescuing children should be our #1 priority.
As a former law enforcement officer and as an activist who's actively engaged in liberating people from sex trafficking, you are trained in being able to identify the signs of human trafficking. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And others, including people who protect our southern border, are trained in that as well.
That's correct.
So when they're at ports of entry, they can see when somebody exhibits the signs of either being trafficked or engaging in human trafficking.
Absolutely. I can give you a specific example of a CBP officer who saw the carotid artery popping on this guy and said, something's up with you. Boom, looks behind the van, there's a child back there. He opens up the van, takes out the child, and there's videos of child pornography of that little boy and that man abusing him. They got him. These are our trained CBP officers. They're brave men and women, and they're looking for those signs.
So if that individual who was trafficking that little boy had an easier chance to go through someplace else, someplace where there was no barrier, would they have found him?
Very difficult. Possible, very, very difficult.
Much harder to save that little boy.
That's correct.
Many of my colleagues have commented on the fact that barriers can sometimes be circumvented. People can sometimes go above it or below the barrier. What's your reaction to this?
It's correct. I've crawled through tunnels, multiple tunnels between Mexico and the United States. That's why these barriers need to be smart barriers. They need to include technology. There's ways to detect if there's tunnels below you using technology. There needs to be sensors, drones. It needs to be a full court press. If we can save just one kid from being raped 20,000 times, it's worth the full court press in my mind.
Particularly in certain areas. Some areas, there's a lot of traffic, but still no barrier. I'm thinking of parts of the lower Rio Grande Valley where there are a lot of miles of border with no barrier at all, where there's a lot of human trafficking going on.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard.
Thank you.